"Sir, I need you to stop right there and open your bag." The words cut through the quiet afternoon atmosphere of the Arundel County Public Library in Annapolis, Maryland, sharp enough to make multiple patrons look up from their reading and conversations. Jessica Chen, 24 years old and 7 months into her first professional position as an assistant librarian, stood blocking the exit with her arms crossed and an expression that mixed suspicion with the particular self-righteousness of someone who believed they had caught a criminal in the act. Before her stood an elderly man who had just triggered the security gate alarm as he attempted to leave the library. The alarm's electronic beeping had drawn Jessica's attention, and what she saw confirmed her suspicions. An older man, probably in his 70s, carrying a worn leather messenger bag that appeared to be stuffed with books, looking somewhat confused by the alarm. The man was Dr. Robert Harrison, 74 years old, standing at 5 feet 10 inches with the slightly stooped posture that comes from decades of bending over research tables and old documents. He wore clothes that suggested academic comfort rather than fashion, corduroy pants that had been mended at one knee, a cardigan sweater over a button-down shirt with a small coffee stain near the collar, comfortable walking shoes that had logged thousands of miles in archives and libraries, and reading glasses that hung from a chain around his neck. His white hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it while deep in thought, and his face showed the deep lines that come from 7 decades of life and probably 4 decades of squinting at historical documents in poor lighting. To Jessica's eye, he looked exactly like someone who might try to steal books from a public library, elderly, somewhat confused, carrying a suspicious bag, and now caught by the security system. "Sir, the security gate alarm indicates you're trying to remove library materials without proper checkout," Jessica said, her voice growing louder and attracting more attention from nearby patrons. "I need you to open that bag immediately so I can verify whether you've stolen library property." Several library visitors had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation unfold. Some looked uncomfortable with Jessica's aggressive tone, while others seemed curious about what would happen next. An elderly woman reading at a nearby table shook her head disapprovingly, recognizing Dr. Harrison and understanding that a significant error was being made. Dr. Harrison blinked behind his glasses, looking genuinely confused by the accusation and the hostile tone. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. These are my personal books. I've been doing research in the archives section all afternoon. I always bring my own reference materials." His voice carried the slight rasp of age and the measured tone of someone accustomed to academic discourse rather than confrontation. But Jessica was convinced she had caught a book thief, and she was not about to let him talk his way out of the situation. This would be her first significant security incident, and she was determined to handle it by the book, pun intended. "Sir, that's exactly what someone would say if they were trying to steal books. The alarm doesn't go off for no reason. Either you have library books that weren't properly checked out, or you've somehow tampered with our security system. Either way, I need to inspect that bag right now, or I'm calling the police." The threat hung in the air, harsh and unnecessary. Several patrons exchanged shocked glances at the escalation. Dr. Harrison slowly set his leather messenger bag on a nearby table and began to unzip it with hands that showed a slight tremor. "Young lady, I assure you there's been a misunderstanding. But if it will resolve this situation, you're welcome to look in my bag." As he opened the bag, Jessica immediately saw what appeared to confirm her suspicions, at least 6 hardcover books, all appearing to be academic or historical texts, exactly the kind of valuable reference materials that the library struggled to keep in stock because they were frequently stolen. She reached into the bag and began pulling out books one by one, examining them for library markings or security strips. The first book was a thick volume titled Naval Operations in the Chesapeake Bay, 1776 to 1815. She flipped it open to the title page, looking for library stamps or ownership markings. What she found instead made her pause, by Robert J. Harrison, Ph.D. She set it aside and pulled out the second book, The United States Naval Academy, A Comprehensive History. Again, the title page showed, by Robert J. Harrison, Ph.D. A third book, Annapolis Maritime Heritage, 3 Centuries of Naval Tradition. Same author. A fourth book, The War of 1812 in Maryland Waters. Same author. All 6 books in the bag had been written by the man she had just accused of theft. Jessica's confident expression began to crack as the reality of her error slowly penetrated. She looked at the books, then at Dr. Harrison, then back at the books. Her face was transitioning from righteous anger to pale realization. Before she could formulate a response, a voice called out from across the library floor with a mixture of concern and recognition. "Dr. Harrison? Is everything all right?" The speaker was Margaret Sullivan, 58 years old, the head librarian who had worked at this branch for 32 years and knew virtually every regular patron by name. She had been in her office dealing with administrative work when she heard the commotion and came to investigate. When she saw Dr. Harrison standing at the security gate with Jessica examining his books, her expression shifted to something between dismay and anger. Margaret walked quickly toward them, her sensible shoes clicking on the polished floor with the purposeful sound of someone about to deliver a correction. "Jessica, what's going on here? Why are you going through Dr. Harrison's personal belongings?" Jessica turned to face her supervisor, still holding several of the books, trying to formulate an explanation that wouldn't sound as bad as what had actually happened. "The security alarm went off when he tried to leave, and I discovered he was carrying multiple library books in his bag without having checked them out. I was investigating a potential theft." Margaret's expression transformed from concern to genuinely angry as she processed what Jessica had just said. She looked at the books Jessica was holding, recognized the titles immediately, and closed her eyes briefly as if asking for patience from a higher power. "Jessica, those are Dr. Harrison's personal books. Books that he wrote. Books that are in our collection because he donated them to the library. Dr. Harrison is not stealing books, he's one of the most distinguished patrons and benefactors this library has ever had." The words hit Jessica like a physical force. She looked down at the books in her hands with new understanding, seeing the author's name, the same as the man she had just publicly accused, printed clearly on every single cover and title page. Margaret wasn't finished. She turned to address Dr. Harrison with visible embarrassment and genuine apology in her voice. "Dr. Harrison, I am profoundly sorry for this incident. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, and you've been treated with completely inappropriate disrespect. Please accept my sincere apologies on behalf of the library." Dr. Harrison waved off the apology with the gracious dismissal of someone who had dealt with worse situations in his life. "Margaret, it's quite all right." Jessica was doing her job as she understood it. "The alarm did go off, and I was carrying books." Her response was perhaps overzealous, but not entirely unreasonable given what she knew. But Margaret was not about to let this incident pass without ensuring that Jessica, and everyone watching, understood the full magnitude of the error. She pulled out her phone and pulled up the library's website, navigating to the About Us section and then to a page titled Distinguished Donors and Patrons. At the top of the page was a photograph of Dr. Harrison from perhaps 10 years earlier, standing beside several floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "Jessica," Margaret said, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a lecture that should have been unnecessary, "let me educate you about who you just accused of theft. This is Dr. Robert J. Harrison. He holds a Ph.D. in American Naval History from Georgetown University. He's a retired professor from the United States Naval Academy where he taught for 38 years. He's published 14 books on naval and maritime history, 6 of which are considered definitive works in their fields and are used as textbooks at universities across the country. He's won the Naval History and Heritage Command's Samuel Eliot Morrison Award twice, which is basically the Nobel Prize of Naval History. He's been a consultant to the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, and the National Archives." She gestured around the library, specifically toward the Maryland History section. "See that entire section over there? The one with over 200 books on Maryland naval and maritime history. Dr. Harrison donated that entire collection to this library in 2015, valued at over $50,000. He did it because he believed that public access to historical materials was essential for community education. He didn't want payment. He didn't want public recognition. He just wanted these books to be available to anyone who wanted to learn. Margaret pulled up another screen on her phone, showing the library's board of directors page. Dr. Harrison served on our library board of directors for 12 years. He personally raised over $300,000 for our digital archive initiative. The research room on the second floor. The one with all the genealogy records and historical documents. That's the Robert J. Harrison Research Center, named in his honor because of his contributions to preserving Maryland history and making it accessible to the public. Jessica had gone from confident to pale to genuinely horrified as the full magnitude of her error crashed down on her like a wave. She looked at Dr. Harrison with new eyes, seeing not a confused old man with a suspicious bag, but a distinguished scholar and benefactor who had been publicly humiliated by her accusations. Several library patrons had gathered closer during Margaret's explanation, and many of them were looking at Jessica with expressions ranging from sympathy to outright disapproval. One elderly gentleman, a regular patron named Thomas who had been reading at a table nearby, spoke up. "I've known Dr. Harrison for 20 years. He comes to this library 3 or 4 times a week to do research. He's helped me trace my family's naval history back to the Revolutionary War. He's the gentlest, most generous person I've ever met. The idea that he would steal anything is absurd." A middle-aged woman named Patricia, a local history teacher, added her voice. "Dr. Harrison has given guest lectures at my high school for the past 10 years, completely free of charge. He brings his own books to show students. He's inspired dozens of my students to pursue careers in history and research. This is shameful." Margaret turned back to Jessica, her anger now tempered with disappointment. The security alarm went off because Dr. Harrison's personal books have similar security strips to ours. Many publishers use the same system. It's a known issue that causes occasional false alarms. The proper response when the alarm goes off is to politely ask the patron if they've forgotten to check out any materials, verify their items, and let them go. It's not to accuse them of theft and threaten them with police action. She paused, making sure Jessica was absorbing every word. Dr. Harrison has earned a level of respect and trust in this community that you can't even begin to comprehend yet. But beyond that, every patron deserves to be treated with dignity and given the benefit of the doubt until there's clear evidence of wrongdoing. You jumped immediately to accusations and threats without doing even basic investigation. Jessica found her voice, though it came out small and unsteady. "Dr. Harrison, I am so sorry. I was completely wrong. I saw the alarm and the books and I just assumed. I didn't think to check if you'd written them. I didn't ask the right questions. I was disrespectful and I publicly accused you of a crime you didn't commit. I'm genuinely sorry. Dar." Harrison carefully packed his books back into his worn leather messenger bag, the same bag that had triggered this entire incident. "Jessica, I accept your apology. You made an error in judgment, but you were trying to protect library property. That's admirable, even if your execution was flawed. Let me offer you some advice from someone who spent 4 decades teaching young people: always ask questions before making accusations. Always verify facts before drawing conclusions. And always remember that the most knowledgeable and valuable people often look the most ordinary." He gestured to his mended corduroy pants and coffee-stained shirt. "I know I don't look like someone important. I look like a distracted old professor who can't keep coffee off his shirt. But appearance doesn't indicate value or character. The security alarm gave you a reason to investigate. It didn't give you a reason to assume guilt." Margaret added her own teaching moment. "Jessica, you're going to write a detailed incident report about what happened here today. Not for disciplinary purposes, Dr. Harrison has requested no formal action be taken against you, which shows you the kind of person he is, but for training purposes. This needs to be a learning experience. You're also going to spend time familiarizing yourself with our major donors, our distinguished patrons, and our collection's history. You should know these people and their contributions." Over the next several weeks, Jessica did exactly that. She studied the library's history, learned about its major benefactors, read several of Dr. Harrison's books, and gained a new appreciation for the community of scholars and researchers who made the library what it was. She learned that the confused-looking elderly man reading old newspapers in the corner was a retired diplomat who spoke 7 languages. The woman who always seemed to be taking up too much table space was a genealogist who had helped hundreds of families trace their heritage. The disheveled man who came in every morning was a published poet. Appearance, she learned, was perhaps the least reliable indicator of a person's value or contributions. Dr. Harrison continued his regular visits to the library, showing no apparent ill will over the incident. He would occasionally stop by Jessica's desk to recommend books or share interesting historical tidbits. He even invited her to attend one of his public lectures on Annapolis naval history, which she did, and which opened her eyes to the depth of knowledge and passion he brought to his work. The incident became a story told to new library employees during orientation, a cautionary tale about assumptions and the importance of respect for all patrons. The security gate alarm was adjusted to reduce false positives, and procedures were updated to emphasize courtesy and investigation over immediate accusation. And Jessica Chen, though embarrassed by her error, grew from the experience into a better librarian who understood that her job wasn't just about managing books and enforcing rules, but about serving a community of diverse individuals whose value couldn't be measured by appearance or assumptions. 6 months after the incident, when Dr. Harrison donated another collection of rare maritime documents to the library, Jessica was the one who processed and cataloged them. She handled each document with care and reverence, understanding now that she was touching history that Dr. Harrison had spent a lifetime collecting and preserving. And when she finished the cataloging, she personally thanked him for his continued generosity to the library and the community. "Dr. Harrison," she said, "thank you for being gracious enough to keep coming back after how I treated you. Not everyone would be that forgiving." Dr. Harrison smiled with the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand human nature. "Jessica, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you learn from them. You've clearly learned, and you've become a valuable member of this library's team. That's all I could hope for from that unfortunate situation." The worn leather messenger bag continued to trigger the occasional alarm as Dr. Harrison came and went from the library with his personal books. But now, instead of accusations, it received knowing smiles and friendly waves from library staff who understood that the most valuable things often come in humble packages. Where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments about a time when you learned not to judge people by their appearance. Subscribe to Hidden Legends for more stories proving that true value transcends surface impressions.